Hospital porters, pride and dignity, stop the New World Order. Welcome to Panlo TV. Please excuse me if this video is a little bit scrappy, but I've got to do it in one take because I'm going somewhere, so I just get one chance. I can't go back and do it again. I'm actually here. I'm just walking through this little alleyway with woods and things because I'm actually going to the cinema tonight. Oh, I tell a lie. I'm going to see a movie, but it's not a cinema. It's a community centre. It's at the Rose Hill, the new Rose Hill Community Centre, which is this big sort of modern thing they've been building in the middle of the Rose Hill estate for the last couple of years. I've never been there before. Don't know what it's like, but I'm going to see what it is. Yeah, that's where the film is being shown, and the film is called Merchants of Doubt. And I'll show you one of the posters for it in a minute. But basically, it's a film about climate change, and it's very interesting the way it's been marketed. I've never seen it before. I've deliberately avoided looking at its Wikipedia page and things like that because I'm going to do a review. And so this is essentially a review video, and I want to get sort of like a first impression from actually watching the film first. It's a free showing organised by something called the Iffley and Rose Hill Low Carbon Hub. The Iffley and Rose Hill Low Carbon Hub. Now, low carbon hubs are an initiative organised by Oxfordshire County Council and various Oxfordshire local community services to create basically a business. I'll show you their website later. It's got one of these long-winded descriptions using various buzzwords like sustainable, amenable, taking power in the hands of the people, local organisation of energy networks and things like that. Sounds a bit Agenda 21, but I may be wrong. But obviously you can tell even by their name that they are very pro the official line on climate change. That is caused by emissions of gases, carbon dioxide, methane hydrate, etc., etc., which are natural gases, of course, which we admit. The methane hydrate comes out separately from the environment because we're warming it up with CO2. Well, I've done a video called Climate Change. I'll put a link in the description box to that video where I talk about. I'm nearly out of the woods now. It's a bit more light. But basically, I don't go along with that. Now, the thing is, it's very interesting because the posters say, and the sort of marketing for this says, are we being conned about climate change? If so, who by? Well, let's ignore the grammatical area there. It's not who by, it's whom by, or by whom, as proper diction, as millennial woes would say. And then it goes on to say, that's the sort of tagline, so that gives me the impression, if I didn't know better, if I didn't look down a bit further and see that it was organised by the Iffley and Rose Hill Low Carbon Hub, I think, well, that's kind of like the great global warming swindle. It's a kind of expose on the climate change scam. But it can't be. It cannot be. Otherwise, why would they show it? Unless they're about to come clean and say, oh, it was a big trick all along. We got involved in this carbon hub thing because we wanted to draw people in so we could expose the lie of climate change. Is that possible? I don't know. Is that possible? I'll see. I'd be excited to find out. But so it's interesting because I went to see Richard D. Hall, and he said something very interesting about climate change. That's the Tree Hotel there. I like that. That's a lovely little place, that. And I can't stop there for a pint because, as I say, I'm going somewhere. First of all, actually, before I go there, I've just got to nip in and do something else. I'll be back in a minute. I'm going to have to use the night light as I go up here because it's really dark. I'm just in Italy at the moment. Sorry if I'm panting and out of breath, but basically it's been uphill. It's uphill all this way. I'm also going quite fast because it's 6:45 now. I don't want to. I've got to get a move on. I've got to find this place as well. I mean, I know where it is from the park. I've seen it, but I've got to get to it from Ashurst Way. Yeah, I went to see Richard D. Hall. So I'll just explain what I was doing. I just had to drop off a card. As you know, I'm self-employed. I'm not a hospital porter anymore. One of my clients has died. Well, there's a couple. There's a couple. Two American couple I do a lot of jobs for in their garden now and home, and they the old guy, the man, he was ill he's been ill for a long time, many months, and he had cancer, and I sort of knew he wouldn't last much longer, but I didn't think it would be this quick. But he's passed away. I mean, he's quite old. He was 70 something. His wife is as well. He's a sweet man. So I just dropped in a condolence card for his wife. So that's what I was doing. Anyway, Richard D. Hall talks about climate change, and he thinks he's been talking about this Derek Bird business. This guy in Cumbria in 2010. He just went out one day with a gun, shot dead 12 people. He went crazy, including his twin brother. And Richard is now wondering, because Richard has always said that this is to do with the solicitor Kevin Commons, who was suing United Utilities, this water company, for criminal damage and causing death by negligence because of the huge floods of 2009, which resulted in millions of pounds worth of damage and the death of a policeman. And he was one of the people Derek Bird shot. But the thing is, Richard thinks it might tie into this whole climate change agenda, because climate change is big business. Maybe I should say more of this after the movie, but I'll go into this in more detail when the movie's finished. But it's an industry. Climate change alleviation is worth, well, it's got, floating it on the stock market, billions. It's worth billions. And Richard says, well, why do you need billions of dollars simply to make decisions about removing natural gases from your emissions? So that could be another. I'll turn a night light off now because we're heading into the street lit area. It's raining now. Hope the camera keeps working. Just it was snowing earlier. It's great, isn't it? Remember all that warm winter weather I showed you back at Christmas? Now it's March, which I consider the beginning of spring, and then now it starts snowing. First snow we've had. Oof. So so Richard thinks that the whole United Utilities thing may be connected to climate change and the floods, the Cumbrian floods. What they're worried about is that Kevin Commons' case wouldn't only cost some very powerful businessmen an awful lot of money and possibly end them up in jail, but that it might expose the fact that floods, this is what Richard said, floods are not necessarily caused by climate change. Floods are caused by mismanagement of waterways and the water infrastructure, such as rivers, canals, reservoirs, things like that. In the case of Cumbria, it was a reservoir that overflowed. It overflowed because the United Utilities left it full to the brim at the start of winter, when all the experts were saying, no, you should lower it by 5 feet because there's going to be a massive amount of snow melt coming off the Cumbrian mountains in the spring. There's a load of rain coming down. You know, for God's sake, just keep it down, keep it lower. And they wouldn't do it, so it overflowed, and this was blamed on climate change. Well, it's not climate change. You see, it's not just more rain. It's the land can cope with plenty of rain. I mean, it's just Britain, for God's sake. But when you build big concrete structures on riverbanks, and you you mismanage reservoirs and water pipes and things like that, then you get floods. Even if you have less rain than normal. So this was the point that was being made, I think, by these people. Now, where am I now? Right, yeah, I'm getting closer now. So Richard was actually saying, this is what Richard was, so that was very interesting on Richard's part, and I mean, I'd be very interested to know if he's seen this film and what he thinks of it. This movie, Merchants of Doubt. It's there's not a lot more I can say really, except I'm going to show you the poster, because if I'm right, there's a poster, if I remember rightly, hanging up on the door of a substation up here, if I'm in the right place. But it's getting to the ridiculous. It's getting ridiculous, this whole thing. I mean, there's this guy who's been doing a world tour, and this is where it ties into the fear thing. There's a guy called Professor Guy McPherson, and Vinnie Eastwood had him on his show. And it's quite funny because Vinnie just makes a big joke out of everything. He likes to have a laugh, the lighter side of genocide, as he says. And I interviewed Vinnie on my show, and he was saying that you need to have a sense of humour in this world, otherwise it would just get you down. And I completely agree. It's Professor Guy McPherson, he says we're all doomed, basically. He says, he's going around saying the human race has until 2030, then we'll all be extinct. Interestingly, when he first started speaking out, he said it was 2020, but it's been put back to 2030 now. But he's been doing this world tour, travelling everywhere, telling us how we're doomed. He said climate change is too late to stop. It's going to destabilise the methane oil rates. And then he goes on to say, just be glad that you had a chance to live in the first place. He's a bit like the leader of a death cult, basically. Now, somewhere up here, I think. And here we are. I don't know how much of this you can see, so I'm going to... No, you can't see much of it, so I'm going to shine a light on it from my phone. But this is the poster. Merchants of Doubt. Are we being conned by climate change? If so, who? By a free film screening, Merchants of Doubt, by Robert. Friday, 7:30, 4th of March. Followed by discussion, New Rose Hill Community Centre, Ashurst Way, Rose Hill, OX44. There's the information. Rose Hill and Iffley Low Carbon. Now, I don't know if that's their low carbon hub, I don't know whether it's separate. But Merchants of Doubt, see? What do you think of that? Hang on. Can't see it very well here. I'll have to show you better. I've got a photograph of this. I'll show it you better later. Anyway, I'm just going to dry the camera off now. It's now 5 to 7, so I've got to find this place. I'm almost at Rose Hill. Okay, but anyway, I'll just dry the camera off. I've got more to say, but I'll be back in a second. Okay, I think I found the venue, which is here we go. Rose Hill Community Centre. This is a new one they've been building for about 2 years, and this is it. Looks very impressive too. So it's somewhere in that building. I've got to go. So I'm going to head in there now, and I'll catch up with you guys afterwards. Oh, I'm out of here now. I'm heading off. Just leaving the building. Stops raining, thank God. I can even see some stars. Oh, it's cold. That was interesting to watch. Of course, it was not a climate change exposure film at all. It was quite slickly done, actually. It was very, obviously quite a high budget movie. Made by Sony Pictures. People behind a lot of big, a lot of major epics, such as Independence Day and 2012, The End of Times, and ironically, the film The Day After Tomorrow, which Day After Tomorrow is actually a film about a catastrophe caused by climate change by Roland Emmerich, one of the worst filmmakers in the world. Anyway, I'll place them off the main road. It was a couple of skeptics in it too, like Jamie Ian Swiss and Michael Shermer were talking about deception and magic tricks, because Jamie Ian Swiss is a big time skeptic magic guy. And I made some notes here. It basically talks about how, started off by saying how big companies, big major production companies of tobacco, the tobacco industry, the industry producing asbestos, things like that, chemicals, had manipulated. They created PR companies to cast doubt, to deliberately doubt the various scientific evidence that was coming forward to say that their products were dangerous. I mean, everyone knows now smoking's bad for you, but in the 1950s, most people thought it wasn't bad for you. Then the scientific data was saying it was bad for you, and the tobacco companies employed these PR firms to try and clear it up. And that's where the idea comes from, Merchants of Doubt. What I'll do is I'll talk about the film now, but if I don't cover everything, I'll talk about it again when I get home, because I might not be able to cover everything right now. But and what they did was they said, well, this is happening again with climate change. That's what they said. It was, oddly enough, it was a film about a conspiracy theory. But the conspiracy theory is that climate change is real, and the authorities are trying to deny it. Or the big companies and the corporatocracy sort of like creating manipulated doubt through its control of public relations and things like that. And they had interviews with various climate deniers, climate change deniers, who it turns out they were paid by various oil companies. There's the Marshall Institute and the Heartland Institute, which are think tanks, sort of conservative libertarian think tanks, and the directors, they talk about how the science on climate change is wrong, but then it turns out the directors were being paid by big oil companies to say that. And they talk about flame retardants. I mean, like, because the tobacco industry, well, people were dying. A lot of people die in fires. A lot of house fires are caused by cigarettes that have been dropped and things like that. They start a lot of fires in houses, and the tobacco industry manipulated. They got some stooge to go and work in the fire safety or fire brigade training centres, and saying there's nothing wrong with the cigarettes. The problem is just the furniture. The furniture's too flammable, so they have these chemical flame retardants put into it. Turns out the flame retardants are toxic and they cause underweight babies and things like that. But the tobacco companies were behind the flame retardants because they didn't want anyone thinking their cigarettes were dangerous. Things like that. I'll get to the street lights so I can read my notes. I made more notes here. For a sec. One thing I've got to say is I made a mistake earlier in this film. The Iffley and Rosehill Low Carbon Group are not part of Oxfordshire City Council's Low Carbon Hub. It's something entirely different. There were some nice people there. I mean, they introduced me and they talked to me. I didn't tell them who I was and what I believed. They just asked me if I put my name on their mailing list so they'll get in touch with me. I didn't want to go there to get into an argument with them. They were nice people. I think they mean well. They're genuinely concerned about this subject. And just going around a corner now. I'll go back the way. I'll go through the alleyway again because it's quieter. I have to go on the main road to get home, but it's about 9:15 now, so 9:20. It's getting late. There was a discussion, actually. I left before the end because there was a discussion where I didn't take part in it. I was there stage for a few minutes. But so anyway, and the point of the film was, this very same trick is being played on people by the petroleum industry. It's really interesting. So climate change denial, people like, that includes people like me, are basically either perpetrated or we are hoodwinked by the oil companies. The oil companies who don't want to lose revenue, who lost sales, so they're trying to keep people buying their products so that keep people buying the product. So they're saying, well, climate change is not real, so you don't have to stop buying our product, you don't have to keep emitting carbon. Now, from their point of view, I mean, from a low level within there, see, because the conspiracies don't, there's different kinds of conspiracies in the world done by different people who are not always on the same page and are not always connected to the same agenda. I'll explain this during when I talked about free energy, in my free energy lecture. I just said, you know, the people lower down on the chain, in the chain of command, aren't necessarily going to know the real reason for the suppression of free energy. They're not going to be told that. They're going to be told what they need to know, and they're basically people who want an income. That's their whole point, is that they want an income. They want to keep the money flowing their way. They're basically greedy people, greedy bastards who just care about their next $1 million. And it's not as simple as that. I've got to look at my notes when I'm in the light. Yeah, I mean, this film was American. It was specifically aimed at America, and they said that when the scientists used to get, the scientists and the people who backed up the scientists, the public relations people who backed up the scientists on climate change, they got abusive emails where they were called communists. In the 70s they were called communists, and in the 2000s they're called terrorists. You know, it's code words for generally bad guys. That's true about America, actually. Yeah, they do that. I think the main, that's the basic gist of the film. I'll probably think of some more details to talk about later. It's not very productive. I don't want to do an entire review just walking along like this. I think the main issue of the film was there's no suggestion that they themselves, that the pro-climate change, the pro-man-made climate change field, worldview, is perhaps being affected by the same kind of trick. That's my main point of the film. It assumes. I mean, it talks about science all the time. They interview a couple of climate scientists, and they will say, the scientists say this, the scientists say that. That's never questioned. It's never questioned. Firstly, the actual science is never questioned. They just say, well, there's a kind of scientific consensus. Anyone who says there's not a scientific consensus is lying. So these people like the Heartland Institute, who say half of climate change scientists don't believe it, well, they're lying, because they produced a fraudulent report that was included the Spice Girls on it, things like that. And that's true, actually. I mean, there have been, there's no doubt about it. I mean, the most climate scientists do say climate change is real. It's caused by man-made carbon dioxide emissions. But does that mean it's real? Does that mean those scientists themselves are not influenced by political forces? This is the point. I mean, I've spoken about this before, but I mean, the idea that climate change concerns, that the man-made climate change theory is some kind of fringe, starved, isolated and ignored sort of voices crying in the wilderness is nonsense. So if it gets a bit dark here, I'm going into a dark patch. I can see some stars now. I know you can't see them, but I can. Put the night light on for a moment. Where's the button? My fingers are cold. Oh yeah. The idea is it's an art. I mean, the climate change agenda is big business. As I said earlier, it's a multi-billion-dollar business. It is. It's the people like. Look at COP21. I talked about COP21. It's one of the biggest international meetings, highest level international meetings for decades. 177 heads of state were there. David Cameron was there. President Obama was there. Okay, I'll take another turn the light off now. Okay, that's off. I'll just turn the light on and off as I go from dark to light places. So, as I said, it's not. See, this film portrays it the other way around. They portray basically the authorities. It's a very, very left-wing film. It has a very sort of leftist view of the world. That basically the state is a tool of capitalist power, rather than the state being the operator. The state is not the operator of power. It doesn't wield the power. It's the capitalist class that wield the power. So it's like Marxism in a way has this view. The capitalist class are the wielders of power, and the state is the tool they use. Whereas, as I've explained, the capitalist class is not. The Marxists call it the ruling class. Doesn't rule at all. It's not a ruling class. It is a secondary layer. It's a rear echelon of greedy, materialistic amoralists. It doesn't rule. And Riney Randall on Facebook, he and I are always arguing about this because he's a commie. Because we're always arguing about this. The real source of power in this world is the Illuminati, and the Illuminati use corporate and state power equally for their own agenda. Yet they do allow. The Illuminati are quite happy to allow state players, or sorry, corporate players, a little bit of R&R. They do allow them a free rein to pursue their. Okay, night light coming on again. I'm going down Tree Lane, so it's dark here. Well, I see a ghost. Oh, I've got my camera on me if I do. So of course it's not easy to do filming when I'm doing this, but I know a lot of you like me doing films like this. So, it's true that it's because it's undeniable that senior people within various climate change denial organisations in America are. The lobbyists and people like that. The people who run them are lobbyists for the oil industry. I mean, that's documentary provable, but it does not necessarily mean that. Does not necessarily mean that means climate change is real. The scientists are completely pure, and they're drawing these perfect circles of intellectual freedom in an environment of intellectual freedom. It doesn't mean that at all. Now, the film brings up Al Gore, and it talks about the film The Inconvenient Truth. Film I've not actually seen in its entirety, but I've seen the movie debunking it. I've seen the movie debunking the debunkers. I mean, I do look at both sides in this issue, but no one ever, in this particular film, Merchants of Doubt, no doubt was actually shed on the role of Al Gore in this issue. Now they're quite happy to personally attack individuals in the Marshall Institute and the Heartland Institute, and perhaps quite rightly. Perhaps it's a justifiable conflict of interest they bring up. Yet no one ever suggests that Al Gore is similar, because Al Gore is a similar kind of person. Al Gore was a corporatist. Al Gore was Vice President of the United States with Bill Clinton. And then when he failed to win the presidency himself, because Bush got it, he suddenly becomes, because he doesn't go back to his Texas oil business, because he's an oil company man. He suddenly becomes this champion of climate change. And why? He just suddenly woke up one morning and had this kind of epiphany. Oh, I mean, I don't. And the film needs to ask questions like that in order to give it an honest view of the issue. And it doesn't. That's the problem. It does not. Right, light going off now. The fact of the matter is, I mean, we've got COP21, as I explained before. Climate change. There are many businesses making a fortune off, corporate capitalists making a fortune off climate change. I mean, there was this group that was hosting this event. They've just been lobbying the county council and the city council to use solar panels. I mean, the venue is the New Rose Hill Community Centre. That has it's run by solar power. The production of solar panels is big business. Unlike the free energy devices that I talk about in my free energy movies, these are a source of can be a source of a continuous production. So that even though the energy generation is free, they're not. The actual overheads are higher. It's a business that they can keep getting into. So it's a strange film. It's a strange. In a sense, it's almost like it's intended to sow confusion into the issue. Because, I mean, as I've explained, the scientists, climate science, I mean, they had this senator who went to Alaska and he talked to this climate scientist. They're not in the kind of intellectual environment where they can just draw perfect circles. And everything they say, the consensus is the truth. I think the idea that climate change is real, is affected by man-made carbon emissions, is itself highly politicised. It's highly politicised, and there's a lot of money hanging on it. And as I've explained before, it's very important for this agenda to create more authoritarian control, internationalism, one world government. And that can be traced back to documents that were published long ago, 40, 50, 60 years ago, saying, we need a new kind of threat. They accept that people need a threat. People need, if there's no threat from war, we need something else to replace war. And threat to the environment is the perfect replacement for war. It can play the role that a war can have on human psychology, mass psychology and culture. I mean, there's no doubt about it, these documents exist. They're as real as the documents linking the Marshall Institute to oil companies and things like that. So there's another side to this story. It's very ironic that these people will call me a conspiracy theorist when this whole issue is a conspiracy theory in itself. The whole issue they discuss in their film is a conspiracy theory. It's just the right kind of conspiracy theory. What else can I say about this? I've written several things down. Here we go. And in the discussion group afterwards, I only stayed for a short while, but they were talking about how, you see, it's a threat to American economic imperialism. Someone said, and it's again that's the leftist attitude, isn't it? It's all about there's nothing in this world that matters. The world is controlled by and is ruled by people who want money and wealth and materialism, materialist goods to an excess and obsessive level, and nothing else. That's the only agenda. That's the only agenda they have, and so that's the sole reason for everything that goes on in the world. And their class interest clashes with the class interests of the rest of us, the people who are exploited, and etc, etc. So, as I said, I don't agree with that. I think it's more complicated than that. And you can see my previous videos on climate change. I'll put them in the links in the description box to those. But I can't think much more to say about it now. I might do when I get home. It's just I'm out on it. I'll also look at the trailer and the documents and things that goes with it as well, and I'll talk a little bit about those in a minute. So I think we'll leave it for now. I'm going to get home and we'll carry on later. And again, I mean, I've thought about something a bit more. So I thought of something else. I might do this a couple of times every time I say. I'm not going to say any more. Who are all these climate change deniers? I mean, the programme did not. I mean, I watched the programme Great Global Warming Swindle, which featured a large number of other characters who were not featured in the film Merchants of Doubt. Which I do have to wonder if the producers of Merchants of Doubt are giving I think a fair and balanced view of who these climate change deniers are. And I use the term climate change denier. I know it's a dysphemism. It's used by people who want to call us names and say that we're evil and things like that. I'm just using it for convenience's sake. But Ian R. Crane. Ian R. Crane is one of the guys who first wrote about ClimateGate, and the ClimateGate comes up in the film, and they say that it's been investigated. Those ClimateGate emails were taken out of context deliberately by the various oil companies, shells. Well, I don't know. I mean, I've read the ClimateGate emails. I've read the various people talking about them. People like Ian R. Crane, who's talked about them, and I don't see them that way. And Ian himself doesn't work for any oil company. Ian, now I know for a fact because I know Ian, he stayed over at me and Sue's place when he's spoken in Nottingham. He lives in a caravan. If you were working for oil companies and getting paid $150,000 a year to debunk, to pretend climate change wasn't real, do you think he'd be living in a caravan? He's in a caravan in a field at a fracking campsite, an anti-fracking protesters camp. So I'll just come back onto the road now. Just check that's still working, yeah. I mean, people within the truth movement, I mean, say that Ian is a shill, and this brings us into the damn shill thing again. Watch my video of the Shill Squad. Listen, I've done a radio show called The Shill Special as well. So, no, you get into this ridiculous thing like shills. That's not what this review's about. But the question is me. I mean, I'm not being paid by any. Well, I've looked at both sides of this issue. I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced, first thing, by the arguments that I've seen, and I'm also not satisfied that those who claim to speak in the name of science and pure science, the climate scientists, I'm not convinced that they themselves are not being biased by political influences every bit as much or more so than the Heartland Institute, the Marshall Institute, and those other climate change denier organisations. Now, a good example, I've talked about this before, is No Pressure. No Pressure, right? This is a complete contradiction to what I saw in the film Merchants of Doubt. No Pressure is a short film by Richard Curtis, who was with Monty Python fame. And if you haven't seen it before, just Google No Pressure and put in No Pressure and climate change, and just watch it. It's only about 5 minutes long. It's a very short film. First time I saw it, I cried aloud. Basically, there's 3 vignettes within the film. three scenes. The first scene is a school, a classroom at school. Teacher standing at the front tries to get the children involved in the 10-10 carbon reduction campaign. Cut your emissions by 10% by 2010. Two of the children say they don't want to do it. Now, anyone interested in not doing this? And all of them put their hands up except two kids. That's all right, she says, there's no pressure. And then she said, oh, I've just got to do this. And it turns out there's a big red button on her desk. She presses it and the two children explode. You heard me right. These two school children explode. They explode and their blood and bones fly everywhere like in a horror movie. And it goes on to the next scene, which is very similar. I mean, the thing about it is, it's everyone else screams and it's a real horror scene. This film, No Pressure, was never broadcast on TV because it freaked the test audience out so much. But in fact, it was even produced at all. It was never shown on TV, but it was produced at all. The fact that it was produced at all is enough. The fact it's a very high-budget film. It's got all the latest special effects. It has some big names in its cast, like Gillian Anderson, the actress who plays Scully in X-Files, and David Ginola, the footballer, now football manager. So clearly, you know, there's the idea that these poor climate scientists are working. They're working as noble intellectual crusaders without any economic or political influence at all, and in a world which is a corrupt, greedy world which is working against them, completely against them, is simply not true. And that's how I want to add that as well. Well, this is the poster I told you about that I saw pinned up on the wall, which I tried to show you earlier, but it was too dark. This is actually what it looks like. It's a photograph I took of that poster in the daytime, and that was put up in several different places around the area. And I saw one in a fish and chip shop window, which is how I found out about it. And then I went along to see it. That's how I put it in my diary. This is the actual movie poster of which was the official movie poster, which is was put up outside cinemas and things like that to advertise the movie. Now I'm looking at his IMDb page as well. It's older than I thought. It's 2010 it dates back to, so it's 6 years old now. And as it says, it's there to identify parallels between the global warming controversy and earlier controversies. And interestingly, it brings up DDT on the Wikipedia, because I'm now moved to the Wikipedia page as well. Now, DDT, people are still saying, like, DDT was banned after a book was published called Silent Spring in about 1960, a long time ago. And then now people come back and say it's harmless and doesn't do any harm. DDT, incidentally, was an insecticide. It was designed to replace probably more toxic chemicals, but there's all kinds of confusion over whether it's harmful to life and things like that. It's apparently as a book, it's based as a book as well on this. And again, it talks about how the two filmmakers, Naomi Oreskes, who's actually featured in the film, and Eric Conway, and they mentioned a couple of journalists too, and they talk about that a handful of politically conservative scientists with strong ties to particular industries have played a disproportionate role in debates about controversial questions. Well, yeah, but I mean, again, it's all one-sided, as I was saying earlier. There are politically liberal scientists who are very much on the side of global warming and also have political forces operating on them. This is what I think this film does not cover. It does mention the, as I said earlier, it dates back to the Cold War, how a lot of these climate change deniers used to be active in the Cold War against communism and things like that. I'd like to. It'd be good if there was a proper. I don't know. I mean, you could actually make a book like this. You could make a book like this, or a film like this. You could produce a film exactly the same, almost scene for scene, and then you could adapt it into a different scenario in which perhaps the proponents of climate change, man-made climate change, were also subjected to the same criteria as these opponents of man-made climate change. That's what I think I'd like to see. That maybe is a task that we can undertake. I've already seen quite a lot of material which is along those lines, talking about various climate change institutions, things like that, and their connection to the elite groups. And this is what Ian has talked about an awful lot, Ian R. Crane, many other people. And as I've said, an enormous amount of it is at stake here. Basically, the future of our planet is at stake here. Because if we allow ourselves to be fooled into following extreme regulation of government, the destruction of the free economy, the production of a resource-based economy, the reduction of human populations, geoengineering, transhumanism, and other things like that, we will have no excuse other than to say we were conned into it. So in answer to the question, are we being conned about climate change, which is it's on the poster for the movie, yes we are. Who by and why? That's where I differ from the makers of this film. And this film has a rather there's no introspection in this film, as I was saying. They examine the psychology of people who deny climate change. People like me, who don't believe in man-made climate change. Although technically I think man-made climate change is real, because I think geoengineering is going on right now. And as I said in previous films, that you see in the description box, I wouldn't be surprised at all if geoengineering is underway to artificially raise the temperature just to make this point. I wouldn't be surprised if the temperature was raised artificially over Western Europe during the COP21 conference, in order to make sure that the message was taken up by those involved. But they talk about, for instance, this came up in the discussion actually, it wasn't in the movie, but someone was saying how people get into denial, and it was mentioned briefly in the movie about conservative, materialistic America, consumerist America, about how people just want to be left with their picket fences and the ability to consume as much as they want, to drink as much Coke as they want, eat as many steaks as they want, and live that kind of very hedonistic lifestyle. And then this inconvenient truth, as Al Gore calls it, in his inconvenient lie, I call it, comes along and sort of throws a spanner in the works. And people are in denial. They just don't want to hear that. They don't want to be told they have to give these things up and all these things, just the simple things they do going around their daily life. This was mentioned in the film, incidentally, this bit. Like driving the kids to school in the car is a bad thing for the planet. They don't want to hear that, and so when some slick Joe comes along, telling them otherwise, giving them a bit of an out, they'll take it. That's the point in the film. Now, I don't agree with that, because I think what applies to that applies equally to the other side. Because, unfortunately, the bad things in life can be as addictive as the good things. Fear can be addictive. And for those who do believe climate change is man-made, this is a question I often ask these people. What would happen right now if someone were to say to you, the climate scientists were all to come forward and they would put their hand up and say, "Sorry, I was wrong. We got it all wrong. It's all rubbish. We're going to go back on it." And I say these things. Well, I actually asked a climate change believer this, and they became very uncomfortable. You'd think they'd say, "Phew, thank goodness for that. Now I can go and find something else to worry about," or "Phew, now I can relax." But no, they clam up. They get defensive. It's like, it's almost as if the fear of climate change that motivates them into action has become, for them, an end in itself. And I've seen this with other people who campaign against things, even people who campaign against injustices. In Wales, for example, I'm a Welsh boy. I share in this obsession, and I share in my national, in the discredited areas of my nationality as well as in the good sides. They're addicted. you got to ask them about what you ask Welsh people what makes you Welsh, why are you proud to be Welsh. At some point, they're going to say something like, "And we're terribly oppressed by the English," right? You can guarantee a Welsh person will say that, and it's not just Welsh people. The Scots and the Irish are just as bad. They'll say, "And the English people have treated us so badly all these years." And the fact of the matter is, if you could explain to them, if for instance it turned out that, well, that's not really happening anymore, you're not oppressed by England anymore, the world has changed, we've moved on, there's a very different political situation now, connected to globalism, the EU, etc. Then they go, "Oh no, we're still oppressed by the English," and it's almost like their sense of victimhood, their sense of being of this danger, this sense of danger, and this sense of antagonism is a thrill. It develops some kind of thrill which they're addicted to. And I think the same can be said maybe for these people who believe in climate change. Fear, the adrenaline, and whatever negative emotions that are generated by this terror that we're facing, the ice caps melting, the sea levels rising, etc., etc. That also can become something that can become a habit that's very hard to break. And I'm sorry if that sounds patronising, but basically I'm not saying anything about climate change believers that they're not saying about climate change deniers. I'm analysing their psychology the way they analyse mine. And on political levels, what are you going to do? You're going to disband the IPCC, cancel all these treaties, destroy this billion-dollar industry, which is what climate change is. So, in conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, this film, I'd say, go and see it. Get the DVD or go and see one of the screenings. Fair enough, go and have a look at it. But, excuse me, got a bit of a cough. But do bear in mind, you are watching a production which is told from a specific viewpoint, which is extremely analytical of the opposite political viewpoint, but is completely devoid of all introspection of their own side. They don't analyse their own psychology and their own political structures within their own movement. So the film is misleading. It's a conspiracy theory film ironically, about a conspiracy theory that's not true, and you don't often hear me say that. So, well, that was fun. I'm glad I went. I'm grateful to the people who hosted this. I think they were nice people. There's a lady called Eleanor, and there's another couple of other ladies and gentlemen involved. There was about I'd say about 40 people, 50 people there, and they were likeable people. I think they mean well. And well, I don't really know how I'd get into a debate with these people or address them or anything like that. I'm not sure. I wasn't there to debate with them. I was there to watch the film and get information, and that is what I did. So thank you very much to those people. So that was this review of the film Merchants of Doubt. Thank you for watching Hapanwo TV. Hospital Porters, Pride and Dignity, Stop the New World Order.